Welcome to Dialogue Out Loud. My name is Margaret Olson Hemming. I am the art editor for Dialogue, a journal of Mormon thought, and we are here today with Hayley Labrum Morrison, who is one of the featured artists for the upcoming issue of of Dialogue, which just came out. And we're excited to have her here. Hayley Labrum Morrison is an interdisciplinary artist from Salt Lake City, Utah, living and working in Austin, Texas. Morrison's recent solo exhibitions include Tinkling Ornaments at Martha's Contemporary and Of or Off the Body at Doherty Arts Center. She also co-curated Howdy Stranger, a 40-artist exhibition at Foundry for the 221 Austin Studio Tours. She created and co-runs the ongoing critique group Crit Nights and co-founded Concept Animals in 2020. And you definitely should follow her Instagram page, which is at hula hoop with an underscore. She's
just to interrupt, I'm so sorry. I changed it to Hayley Labrum Morrison. So yes, it's at Hayley Labrum Morrison.
Okay,
thank you.
You should definitely follow her Instagram account at Hayley Labrum Morrison. She's one of my favorite people that I follow on Instagram to see her art in the works. Welcome, Hayley. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Margaret.
So I want to jump right in to your art background and how you got into the field. Can you tell me, when did you first begin creating art? When did you feel it as a child? Was it something you discovered as an adult? What's your background?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that I've always enjoyed creating things, even as a child. And my mom still reminds me that I would get more excited about a box of new crayons than almost anything else. But I really started to delve into it deeply in high school. I started to take some AP art classes where I had the freedom to really delve into what being an artist could be. And then I studied a Bachelor of Fine Arts at BYU Provo, and that was an emphasis in painting and drawing, and I did a lot of ceramics there as well. And then really, I knew then that I wanted to be an artist. And I also have had a corporate career, but my whole life, I think that's really what I've wanted to be.
So you pursued the corporate career for a little while, and then...
Yeah. As you can imagine, graduating in 2008 was not the best time to graduate, especially as an arts person. So I did, I taught preschool for a couple of years, and then I had a career in recruiting. It started at the University of Chicago, and I worked in the Career Services Center there and was exposed to campus recruiting. And then I worked with Bain & Company in Australia, and then Gerson Lerman Group in Austin as campus recruiters for both of those. And that lasted for about 5 years. And then as soon as my partner and I felt stable enough, I just decided to pursue art full time. And I've been doing that for about 4.5 years now.
That's great.
Yeah.
You've already touched on this a little bit about the challenges you faced in pursuing artistic study. You know, the financial, economic aspect is always difficult. Is there anything else that you've struggled with as a working artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to say that some of the artists that I've met are the hardest working people that I know, because not only are you, financially trying to support yourself through creative arts, but you're also basically running your own small business. And that means anything from promoting yourself, social media, marketing, all of that, networking, going to art openings, trying to meet new people, and then also just the constant need to create and re-nourish yourself, refill yourself, take care of yourself. That's been a huge part of my practice. Because I am so vulnerable with what I make and my concepts, I do have to take time to refill my well and take care of myself. And that's been something I've really had to learn and take seriously. So yeah, I recommend to all artists take that very seriously.
Yeah, I was going to ask you specifically about the vulnerability part. So yeah, let's circle back to that in a few minutes. That's definitely something I've thought about as I've looked at your art, because it is so much about, it says so much about like your personal experiences and also I think your body experiences. And so yeah, let's for that. Or we can jump into it right now.
That's fine too.
Tell me about like how. So yeah, like what is it like to put something that's so vulnerable about your faith or your sort of journey with the Mormon Church, and also, what looks like a complicated relationship with the Mormon Church and women's bodies in particular.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Mormon community. I grew up in West Jordan, Utah, and I feel like I had a pretty all-encompassing experience with Mormonism. Every aspect of my life was touched by it. And in that, as I grew older and I had more experiences, in the world and with people not in Mormonism, I started to realize that my experience was truly unique. And I wanted to share that because as I've been unpacking my upbringing and who I am now and who I want to become, I realized that a lot of the things that I learned, as there were so many good things, being a good person, taking care of other people, serving, those are all beautiful things. But then there were other things that I found to be distracting to who I actually am and who I want to be. I felt, often that I was supposed to be the perfect Mormon woman. And I often fell outside of those lines, or what I perceived to be those lines. And I started to realize later on that it was very painful for me. And there was a lot of anxiety associated with that. And so I know many other people like me and many women who have similar experiences. And I felt that expressing that through my art was important, not only for me as I work through everything that has been happening in my life, but also for other women that I know who have varying relationships with Mormonism, many who are still in, many who have left, and are also examining the impact of growing up in a patriarchal, faith-based religion that's, changing, but still, has some room to grow. And I think it's important to have dialogue about these, to use the word dialogue. I think it's important to have that word taken seriously and have artists and creators bringing it to the forefront and allowing voices to be heard. So it has been very vulnerable, very nerve-wracking sometimes. You don't know what people are going to think when you create an image that could go either way for someone. So it is a risk, but for me, it's a very worthwhile risk.
Can you elaborate on, there are a couple of your pieces, the one that is behind you, Wantonize, and there's another piece with, it shows like a back of a woman in garments and her bra strap.
Yes.
And it seems like, these very particular symbols of the church that, an outsider might not understand.
Correct. Yes.
Almost becoming a part of the woman's body.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that? How do you choose these symbols? How do you see that that intertwinement of the material and the corporal, I guess, and what does it mean for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Very good question. I think so. To talk about some of those symbols specifically, the Young Women medallion I use quite a bit. I completed my personal progress program and I earned the Young Womanhood Recognition Medallion, and it was kind of a representation for me at this point of checking boxes, but also wondering what exploration I could have been doing outside of those boxes with my teenage years, and wondering if, those boxes were really about what I wanted to become as a person. And even then, I wanted to be an artist, and I was concerned about the idea of whether or not that would be supported by my community. And so I think that specific medallion represented to me the idea that I felt like I had to achieve this specific thing. It was, the ultimate goal as a young woman. And to earn it meant that I was a good person, right? It meant that I had done all the things that I was supposed to do. I was obedient. But then what had I lost maybe in the meantime? And for me, it could have been that I didn't have experiences that might have led me to discover more about myself. Or it could have blinded me from a variety of experiences that would help me understand the world better. And so I've used that specific symbol in several ways. And this portrait right here, Wonton Eyes of my mother, is kind of just a symbol of that, not necessarily of my mother specifically, but of me and many women that have come before me. I'm a 7th generation Mormon who have submitted and been obedient, and maybe it hasn't always been to their benefit. And then to go to the garment painting you were talking about, that painting's called Against the Skin. And I chose to use that. I wanted to do it in as respectful a way as possible, because I do know that garments are sacred symbols to many people in the world. And I chose to show the back because I thought it was recognizable enough, but also respectful enough that it would invoke certain feelings from people who knew what it meant, while also expressing to people who have no idea about Mormonism that the bra strap, the feeling of containment, of having something against your body that might not be comfortable, but serves a purpose in society. And specifically with the garments, I had a complicated relationship, especially as I first started wearing them. I felt like I had to throw out a lot of things in my closet, even though I wasn't particularly showing a lot of skin. It felt very strange to understand how I was supposed to be dressing, what it meant to have something constantly on my body to remind me of the covenants that I had made. And now looking back on it, I realized that I had felt that it was supposed to be a very specific way, rather than, I didn't feel like there was much of a voice for me and to say how I could wear them or what my relationship to them was. And so for me, a lot of those symbols that I use are kind of just like examining these symbols, these tools within Mormonism that can be used to, bring more faith, but also to constantly remind you to be better, to be perfect, to be a certain thing. Mm. And for me, it had consequences. It created a lot of anxiety and angst and feelings of guilt and not being good enough. And so I'm trying to examine those and potentially bring that to light for other people.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That's a fascinating answer. What's one of the most interesting things to me about your work is that it is so vulnerable and so personal, and yet I don't come away feeling like I know what you believe and what you think about these things, which I am sure is quite deliberate.
Yes, it is.
You're walking away thinking more about like, well, what do I think about these things, or how do I feel about, the personal progress medallion and, or these things that I have experienced as a woman in the church. But it's this fascinating line that you're walking of like, yes, it's so personal, and yet I have no idea.
I'm so glad that this is exactly what I'm hoping for. So that feedback is exactly what I want. While it is so personal, I don't want to, hit anyone over the head with my messaging. I just want there to be a contemplation and a dialogue, because it is a personal experience, but it's so complicated and nuanced for each person that my experience does not directly translate to any single person, and how they've experienced Mormonism or these symbols or, any of the things that you wear on your body. And so I'm not trying to preach necessarily. I'm just trying to create the opportunity for an interaction, some contemplation, and dialogue again.
Well, I think you succeed in just incredible ways.
That's great to hear.
Can you tell me about we've talked a lot here about how your work has engaged with Mormon studies or Mormon culture. Can you tell me more about how does your work reflect other values that you have outside of Mormonism or other parts of your identity?
Absolutely. So as I've seen more of the world and met a variety of people, I've come to have quite a bit of compassion for those who are striving for more representation and the ability to be seen. And so it's probably no secret. I'm very female forward, very, I'm very much empowered by the idea that women are taking back a lot of their lives and a lot of their choice. And I'm a huge proponent of that. And I, am living in Texas, and there's a lot of talk about that here and about reproductive rights. And so that's all very close to me. I have specific friends that have very personal things going on that, are really close to home for me. And then also with LGBTQ, people of color, I am very progressive about those issues as well, and do my best to, represent in a kind of in an ally way. I don't feel that, I feel that I can share my experience and my experiences as a white woman who was raised in Mormonism. And so while I'm an ally to other social issues, I think that sharing my experience has more to do with the feminist aspect, the ability for women to have choice. And so that's my, kind of take on social justice, social issues. And while I toe the line within my artwork, I am in my personal life very much thinking about all of those things, as well as philosophy, other ways of that religions impact people, and other, even not just religions, but organizations in general, and the way that people keep striving to have equal treatment. And I'm very much an advocate for that.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about this series that you did. We have one of them in dialogue called Vain Imaginations.
Mm-hmm.
I think you did 4 of them. Is that
right? Yes, correct. Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry. Did you have a...
No. I'm just going to describe it a little bit for listeners. I think in all of them, there's a woman who is in a bikini or a tankini, and then there's a hand that's sort of over her. And in Vain Imagination, she's lying horizontally and her eyes are closed. Mm-hmm. This is one where I feel uncomfortable looking at it.
Good.
I'd like to know more about what you were thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that those 4 pieces were kind of my first foray into using a more literal depiction of the female body. And each of those figures, they're actually mostly separate women, but each of them are relatives of my dad, sisters, and cousins. And those are actual photos from, our family photo archive. And I chose to use those figures and reference photos because I thought it was interesting to see that they were wearing what would be deemed now as modest bathing suits. Mm-hmm. But back then, showing your stomach was actually a really big deal. And even now in Mormonism, showing your stomach is a really big deal. And then also I know all of those women now in my life, and they have lived somewhat typical Mormon wife. I don't know how to say it. Like, I'm so respectful, and I know that they are very happy and love their lives, but they have lived the usual Mormon lifestyle. And so to see them kind of young and inhibited really brought to life, for me, the transition from being a teenage girl, I should say, to becoming a woman of faith and becoming a mother, becoming a wife, doing all of the things that you're supposed to do. And then, of course, using the hand that hopefully looks very masculine. I use that hand to not only to note power, the largeness of the hand, and the fact that it just looms over the figures. It could clearly be seen as like, oh, that's patriarchy or whatever. But beyond that, in Mormonism, as many of you, or as your readers, and you probably know, that the male hand wields power in a very specific way. And with the priesthood, even with leadership shaking your hand when you're at a meeting, it kind of is, that like, hello, Sister Labrum, hello, Sister Morrison, that I have heard for so long, always served to remind me what my place was in a lot of ways. And obviously the fact that, my dad could give me a blessing, but my mom couldn't. He could lay his hands on my head, but she couldn't. So there are a lot of, things within just that male hand itself, but the representation of the female figure is, it's me, it's every woman. It's the feeling of being watched, of not quite having control of your surrounding, of never being able to just exist freely, and, just lying on the beach, not quite knowing who's looking at you or what danger you might be in. That's a general feeling that I have felt many times, and I'm sure many other women have felt.
Yeah, no, I felt it for sure, and had that exact feeling of looking at these pieces of a blessing and the threat to like what's going to happen to this girl.
Exactly.
And her swimsuit looks just like one that I saw I have a picture of my grandmother wearing. These. And it reminded me of the prom queen portraits in the halls of BYU, and how they're all wearing these like sleeveless or even what do you call it, like off the shoulder dresses, and how much these like standards of what is acceptable has changed over time, even though we think that they, that we've always had the same standards of modesty.
Exactly. Very good point.
One of the sad things about our print on paper, but luckily we do have all of the articles online, is that we don't capture these really bright colors that you use. There's one in particular from Is There No Other Way, where you clearly have a temple interior, although, again, I just think you're a master at like employing these Mormon objects, scenes that if you weren't Mormon, you would have no idea what you were looking at. And then if you are, you're like, oh, I know exactly what that is. But it's clearly inside the temple, except it's like hot pink, these really bright greens, sort of neon colors, completely opposite of the, washed out beige and white and, pale gold that we usually see. Besides the rest of the image, which is very powerful in itself, can you tell me, like, how did you choose those really bright colors to make it both recognizable and also like kind of shocking from the moment you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit of background, I was married in the Salt Lake Temple. My parents were married there. Their parents were married there. And I had, over 30 ancestors that traveled across the plains to settle in Salt Lake City and no doubt had part in building that temple with their own hands. So that Salt Lake City temple has huge significance to me personally, but also to my, progenitors. And so I think that in and of itself, the temple had already had this place in my mind and in my body. And then I wanted to depict it. And I've depicted a couple paintings that have interior temple environments. But this specific reference image that I used that had the altar, the mirrors, that again, you might not even know that they're mirrors unless you've seen this specific place with your own eyes. I wanted to depict that because of just how consequential that impact of eternity is in Mormon doctrine, and also just in my own way of thinking about life and the world and existence. And so I used that architecture to surround this female figure. She's leaning kind of casually and gently against the altar, which anyone who's been in that space knows that this is one of the holiest places. And so to have her in a swimming suit, which would never be allowed in a sealing room, leaning against an altar, could be seen as very disrespectful. But for me, it was seen as a reclamation that she has the right to exist in that space how she wants to. And using the pink, it kind of unfolded. I knew that I would have pink in there. I just didn't know how much. And by the end of the painting, I was thinking like, okay, is this too much pink? And I had a few friends say like, varying things like, oh yeah, it's too much. And other people saying, no, it's great. And ultimately I was like, no, I really like the pink. I think obviously pink is used as a very feminine color, and the brightness, the shockingness, as you mentioned, was very important to me to create a sense of like eeriness and surrealness that, we know that this actual thing doesn't exist, but it does for me, if that makes sense. It's a world that I wish I could live in. And it's a world where maybe anything's possible. Maybe I could be a fully believing Mormon woman, but also maintain a lot of the independence that I hold so dear. So for me, it is kind of just like this surreal environment that I wish existed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You're saying that pink is the woman claiming that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. I feel like I've spent a lot of time looking at your work, and
That means a lot.
You talk to you and feel like I'm getting these deeper layers of understanding your work better. Can you tell us, what projects are you working on, artistic or otherwise? What's keeping you busy these days?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just got back from a month-long residency at Vermont Studio Center, where I started a new project that I felt is very ambitious. It incorporates a lot of 3D elements, and it's a painting, but there are going to be a lot of 3D elements, and I'm really excited to finish that up and share that with the world. But in the meantime, I have 4 exhibitions. Currently, right now, I have a small piece at the Springville Museum of Art and the annual salon. So if you're in Utah, please go visit that. And then I have a couple exhibitions in Austin, one at Icosa Gallery and another at Contra Common, and those are opening at the end of May. And then I'll also be in a group show in Brooklyn, New York at Tchotchke Gallery opening May 30th. So if you're in any of those areas, please check it out. And I'll have new work for the Tchotchke Gallery piece, and I'm really excited. It's about the piece is about Lot's wife, aka also me. So I'm incorporating some new media in that as well, including salt from the Great Salt Lake. So stay tuned because I've got a lot of new exciting stuff coming out.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Sounds fantastic. I'm pleased to hear that you're in all of those shows. And one sounds Incredible. So I already mentioned your Instagram page, but can you tell us where people can find out, like see your work, follow what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Instagram is definitely the best place to find out the latest on what I'm working on right now. But I also have a website, which is hayley.co. And you can see all of my past work, anything you want to know about me with my bio, my artist statement, you can find it there. And I've done a few other interviews that you can check out online just by Googling my name. But read the dialogue journal, see the art with it and read the words. And I feel like you'll get a good idea of my work and the feelings that I'm trying to portray through it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Hayley, for sharing your art with Dialogue Journal, and thank you for joining me today to talk about your craft. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.